Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of At the Coalface Live for today, 22nd of April, 2022. And I'm sorry I was not with you last week. It was obviously the Easter long weekend, Good Friday and Easter Monday. So it was a 4-day weekend, and I decided to take the week off last week from broadcasting and had a nice relaxing weekend, even though it rained in Auckland for most of the weekend. So we didn't try to get out of Auckland for the long weekend because of the utter madness that the motorways always are over the Easter weekend. So we stayed local, and we did lots of local stuff. So it was a nice break, nice 4 days of recharging the batteries. But it is good to be back here with you today. And what I want to talk about today is something I have never talked about on the live show before. I've talked about it in some other elements of content and some other places. And of course, on the podcast, I have a lot of ISVs and software vendors that work in the e-commerce, omni-channel, and retail tech SaaS space. And so it's a big part of the space that I and those of us in the e-commerce space are involved in, but it's something that doesn't necessarily get discussed too much. And that is, when I have these discussions with you guys very openly and frankly on a Friday afternoon, we're oftentimes talking about what's happening in the retail space. So what's happening with specific retailers, what's perhaps happening with specific technology, what's happening with trends in our space, what's happening with what we think is in a macro context going to happen to our industry over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. So we cover a lot of territory from and even talking a little bit about the agency space and talking about how projects get delivered and specific technologies and a whole bunch of other things that are related to our space. But the one area that there's two specific areas that I haven't really ever talked about in too much detail before, and that's the ISV space, or independent software vendor space, and then the VC space. And without both of those, our industry would cease to exist. And so they're actually very, very critical parts of our industry. And it's very important for those of us that work in the space to at least understand, even if we're not directly working with a vendor in the space or we're not directly working with VCs that are investing in the space, it's very important for us to understand the dynamics of our industry as fully and as multidimensionally as we can. If we are going to add the most value to our industry that we can, we have to understand how it works. We can't just understand it through our lens. We can't just understand it through, if we work for a merchant, we can't just understand it through the merchant lens. If we work for an agency, we can't just understand it through the agency lens. Or if we work for a dev house or a design agency or as an independent consultant, we oftentimes see our industry through one very, very narrow lens. But there's so much more to it, and we can never stop learning if we want to continue contributing and adding value to our industry and actually being able to make really, really close professional partnerships throughout the lifespan of our career and make, personal and professional friends within our industry. We actually have to understand the space in quite a high level of detail. And I think that if you've got a passion for our space, if you've got a passion for e-commerce, if you've got a passion for omni-channel, if you've got a passion for retail, then it is absolutely in your best interest to fully understand the industry that you are playing in. And if we think about the ISV aspect, the independent software vendor aspect of our industry, again, I've said it before and I'll say it again, they are massive enablers for what we do. If we look back across the last 10 years of our industry in terms of maturity, in terms of growth, in terms of not only growth of capability in the industry, but also growth as a percentage of revenue of total retail, obviously it's been on a pretty radical upward trend. And then of course things grew again during COVID, artificially, no doubt, with guns to people's heads being forced to stay at home. But nevertheless, our industry has seen steady high trajectory growth over the last 10 years or so. And when we look at that, there's massive, it's not just a small cottage industry anymore. This is not just e-commerce and omni-channel and retail. We're not just sitting underneath the IT space, for example. And a lot of people historically have shoved e-commerce. They've shoved digital into the IT bucket, both in their business and in their lens that they see e-commerce and omni-channel through. And it couldn't be, further from the truth now. We are well and truly a practice of our own e-commerce and digital. And because of that, there are so many facets to our industry, and software is just one part of that, but it is a very, very big part of our industry. Most of us would not be able to do what we do without the amazing, cutting edge, very mature technology that is already operating in the space, combined with all the amazing new technology that's coming down the pipe every single day. And when I think of newer technologies that are coming, I'm thinking of even CDPs, which have really come into their own over the last 12 to 18 months. I think of PIM platforms, product information management platforms, which have gone through radical maturation over the last 2 to 5 years. Warehouse management systems, which are more democratically available than ever before to even small and medium-sized retailers. It used to be you had to be doing 20, 30, $40 million a year. Even 5 to 10 years ago, you had to be doing massive, many millions of dollars to justify the expense of implementing a proper end-to-end warehouse management system for an owned warehouse that you may own. Nowadays, that's more accessible and more democratically available than ever before. Now, still a lot of components of a modern commerce stack, you still need to be doing $3, $4, $5 million worth of revenue, but that's like a tenth of what you used to have to be doing in revenue to justify the kind of spend that you used to have to justify to get into a very high quality, fully modernized commerce stack. But I want to give a massive shout out to the ISVs out there that are making this happen, because we have a lot of entrepreneurs out there. We have a lot of developers. We have a lot of visionaries. We have entrepreneurs basically grabbing the industry by the horns and either scratching an itch or finding a gap and building towards the gap. And we can see that, as I said, even in the CDP space, we've just seen CDPs improve dramatically, both in the terms of the total number of CDPs available in the market, but their capabilities and their price coming down dramatically. And that's due to huge amounts of competition entering the market, and that competition forcing each other to become better much more rapidly and to bring their price down so that it can be more democratically available to a much larger TAM, or total addressable market. And certainly as part of what our consultancy does, the lens that I see a lot of the stuff through is through the consultancy lens, right? So big portion of our business is consulting directly with merchants on how to improve their e-commerce operations and every facet of what they do online, and giving them tools and working through processes and organizational design and technical design and solution design and data architecture, and working through all those things to help them level up every facet of their online game. But increasingly, what we're also seeing is that there's a need for our consultancy services with ISVs, because oftentimes we have engineers who are starting these software platforms. It is not necessarily entrepreneurs and not necessarily salespeople that are starting up these platforms. It is engineers, it's builders, it's people that understand intrinsically what the challenges and problems are in the market, and they're either scratching an itch or they see a gap and they themselves know how to code, or they can, they are in the pantheon of coders, and so it's very easy for them to find a couple of fellow coders and they go to work and they start building. We think of great builders like Elon Musk, and he's that kind of guy. He's the kind of guy that just gets on with it and starts building things. Now, Elon Musk happens to be an amazing marketer as well, and he happens to be an amazing entrepreneur. But oftentimes with ISVs, that's not necessarily the case. Oftentimes we have engineering or product-led platforms, right? And so these platforms tend to be, very technical in nature. They have to be, because our industry is becoming more technical by the day. And so you have very, very smart people, developers, engineers building these technologies for market, but they don't necessarily how to take that product to market. They don't necessarily know how to engage with the market. They don't necessarily know how to engage with potential end customers and users of their product. They don't necessarily know how to engage with other technical partners that they may need to build out integrations with to insert themselves easily into the ecosystem. And they don't necessarily know how to have discussions with partners, agency partners and resellers and other ISVs about how to go to market with the product. So they don't necessarily know how to achieve perfect product market fit, but they also don't necessarily know how to achieve and develop and design a go-to-market model, and they don't necessarily know how to design and build a partnership model. And so that's increasingly what we offer as a service. We work with ISVs to help them do all those things. And so just as we have developed a fit for commerce framework for working with merchants, we have developed a fit for market model and basically an entire process to go through with ISVs to help them go to market better, smarter, faster, stronger. And then we're in the process of developing right now a fit for investment framework. And that's targeted fairly and squarely at the VC space. And the reason why we're developing these frameworks is because without frameworks, you can't build something that's scalable and sustainable as a service provider, such as what we're doing. We can't go to market without a plan, without a process, without a playbook, without a rule book to follow, without a tick list that we can go through and make sure we're ticking all the boxes and that nothing slips through the cracks. And so much like we're building out our go-to-market model and our services layer and our, not only our go-to-market model, but how do we achieve product market fit as a service provider in our own right, but how do we work with those ISVs out there to do the exact same thing? How do we systematize building out product market fit? How do we systematize identifying your ideal go-to-market model? How do we systematize a partnership development model? How does that look? Why should it be built this way? How's that going to benefit you? How's it going to benefit the other side of the coin on the other side of the partner coin? And so when we also look at fit for investment, what we're seeing now is that as funds become tighter with VCs, as interest rates go up and all that cheap money stops sloshing around in the tank, all of a sudden now VCs are starting to become a little bit tighter with their money. They're being more selective. They're not just throwing any amount of money at all at the e-commerce wall and seeing what sticks, which is what was happening realistically over the last 24 months during COVID. Basically, if you were doing anything in the e-commerce space as a vendor, you could very easily go out and get a lot of money from the VC world and in some cases from the private equity world, but mostly from the VC world. And so what we need to do now and what we're seeing is that our skills and our knowledge in the industry can massively benefit VCs when they need to start being more selective about where they put their money. As capital allocators, they're having to be more selective because there's not as much cheap money to go around. And so therefore, instead of 1 in 10 needing to pay off, 1 in 10 investments needing to pay off, moving forward, maybe they're aiming at more like 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 investments needing to pay off to justify their investment, the checks that they write, that they dump into those businesses. And so that's another area of the industry that a lot of people don't understand and don't necessarily appreciate. Without the public and private markets supporting the ISVs that are building the technology that those of us working in the industry are deploying and that the merchants are deploying, without the capital coming from the private and public markets, a lot of these pieces of software would never ever see the light of day. Now, some of them would because maybe the developer is independently wealthy, or he's doing it as a side hustle. He's doing it in the evenings, the mornings, the weekends, outside of his day job, and he's just coding away in the dark and slaving away, doing 60, 70, 80-hour weeks, for years at a time, and to put a product to market, and then he or she can quit their day job and then focus on their baby full time. But more often than not, particularly nowadays, for a piece of software that sees success in our industry to reach escape velocity. And when I say escape velocity, I mean seeing enough deployments outside of their home market to build a sustainable business model where they can continue to add features and functionality to their own platforms, where they can continue to penetrate new markets, where they can continue to localize their software in those local markets, where they can build out, a sales pipeline in those markets. They can have, local customer success staff. They can have account managers. They can have program managers, project managers, whatever it is that they have. They can maybe even have local engineering and support talent, or at least support that follows the sun. So, when we think about the globalization of software, particularly in the SaaS software space, what we see is that it takes a lot more money nowadays to reach escape velocity, to reach product market fit, to develop a go-to-market model that is actually successful and getting traction. We're seeing that is now more difficult than ever because there's more competition for merchants. There's more online merchants in almost every category than ever before. We're now seeing that there's more competition. There's more competition in the software space as well. And so, where back in the day there might have been one major PIM platform, now there's 10. Where there might have been one major e-commerce platform, now there's 5, 6, 10. Where there used to be one major CDP platform, maybe it was a segment in your particular region of the world, now there's 4, 5, 6, 7 very good CDPs. Where there used to be one ERP that was really quite localized, maybe in your country or in your part of the world, and it was the most popular, and so there was an ecosystem around it, now there's 10. And so pretty much no matter what we look at from a technology perspective in the commerce space, there's pretty much competition across every single category of e-commerce, omni-channel, and retail tech software that you can imagine, from marketing automation to point of sale to system integration to to inventory management, order management, warehouse management, CRM, help desk software, site search, personalization, anything you can think of. There are a minimum of 3 or 4 very, very, very good pieces of software in each of those categories that have already reached escape velocity. And so if you're going into those categories, it can be very, very challenging unless you've got a new take, unless you've got a slightly unique angle on that. It's very, very hard to penetrate a market. And so that's why a lot of these software vendors, even though they show great promise in many instances, it can take a substantial amount of investment, even if you have something unique, to cut through the noise and effectively create a new category of your own is very, very expensive and very time consuming to do. And so as a result of that, it behooves us those of us that are working in the industry. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start the podcast, because I wanted people to know what the technology was that's out there that I already know about, that I've used, that I've deployed before, that's very popular, and maybe learn a bit more about their backstory, learning more about what they're doing, learning more about what they've got on their radar, learning more how they fit into the broader commerce ecosystem, but also hopefully bringing to the table pieces of technology that maybe wouldn't otherwise be very well known. Trying to expose you guys to discussions around technology that can be transformative for your business, but you may have never heard of it before. And maybe they don't have the funds, like the big boys and girls do, to be able to be splashy with advertising funds and be splashy with their partnership funds and all the ways in which they go to market. And particularly if they haven't gone public yet, that pool of funding that they have available to them might be smaller than ever before over the next 12 to 18 months with VC funds shrinking. And then if we look at the VC market specifically, VCs have had it good. They've had it amazingly, amazingly good since 2008. We haven't had, apart from 2008, 2009, we've pretty much been in a bull market with short down cycles, down legs, but we haven't had a recession since 2008. So we're well and truly overdue. And I think there's a perfect storm brewing of rapidly rising inflation and rapidly rising interest rates to counter that on a macroeconomic perspective. I think what we're going to see is a lot of those cheap funds dry up. We're going to see a lot of the opportunists, both the VC opportunists, but also the ISV and software vendor opportunists that sprang out of COVID over the last 2 years. Those people, they say a rising tide floats all boat, and COVID made us all look like geniuses over the last 2 years if you had anything to do with e-commerce, omni-channel, and digital retail. And I think that those chickens are going to come home to roost. And I think that a lot of ISVs are going to go out of business because they don't have enough runway and they haven't reached escape velocity yet. They don't have product market fit. They haven't gone public yet. They don't have access to private liquidity anymore because that's drying up. And so that's going to be a real challenge over the next 12 to 18 months. We're going to see a slowing down, I think, of new technologies coming to market and new technologies coming onto our radar because there's simply not as much cheap money to make that happen nowadays. And technology vendors are going to have to get a lot more creative about how they go to market. They're going to have to be a lot more creative about how they build their brand. They're going to have to be a lot more creative about how they build their category and do category development. And they're going to have to probably go and employ somebody like Chris Walker at Refine Labs or somebody like him to help them understand the new world of marketing as of 2022. And I didn't get any money to say that, but Chris is amazing. And what he talks about is absolutely amazing. And so if you're an independent software vendor and you need to get better at marketing, I well and truly recommend that you go and check out somebody like Chris Walker, that you watch his content, you listen to his content, you subscribe to his podcast, because things are going to get rough. The seas are going to get choppy over the next 12 to 18 to 24 months. And if you're a VC out there and you've had life really, really, really good pretty much since 2008, those waters are going to get choppy too. And so therefore, you're going to have to get smarter. You are going to have to do better due diligence than ever before on the ISVs that you're looking at dumping money into. You're going to probably have to get a little bit more selective instead of just throwing money at the e-commerce wall and seeing what sticks. You're going to, the cost of capital is going to go up. And so therefore, cash is not going to be splashed the way that it was before. And, there's a lot of cautionary tales out there with Fast and Afterpay and some of the marketplaces like Catch Group showing massively slowing revenue. There are questions about, Catch's viability. We saw Fast go out of business. We saw the value of Afterpay get cut by around $18 billion after it got acquired by Square. And so we're seeing this massive contraction in valuations. We're seeing a slowdown in the economy. We're seeing capital drying up, and we're seeing some real challenges ahead. But I still think this, as always, presents opportunities for the good guys, the businesses that are doing good work, the people in the market that are good humans that are doing good work. I'm not concerned at all whether our business is going to grow over the next 12, 24, 36 months. I know for a fact we will, because we have good intent, we do good work, and we're good human beings. And I think if your intentions are good, if you're trusted in the industry, then you will always find work. You will always be busy. You will always find people that want to transact with you and want to build a relationship with you. And I think that's the most important thing, is the concept of community and relationship, I think, has been lost over the last 2 years, especially as opportunists have come to our industry. And so I'd say if you're an ISV in the space, if you're a VC in the space, buckle up, because it's about to get real interesting. And I look forward to hopefully getting to know more of you through the podcast, through the services we offer, and just as someone that works in the industry and follows the industry very, very closely and tries to do everything he can to help us all get better at what we do and tries to share his knowledge freely. That's certainly what I try to do. I don't try to hold anything back as kind of my secret sauce about what I do. I'm an open book. And so I really, really love this industry. I really hope that it can ride out the waves of the next 12 to 24 months as things get a little bit more challenging macroeconomically. And I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. It's Anzac Day here on Monday, so it'll be a long weekend again for us here in Australia and New Zealand. And I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend, have a fantastic week, and I look forward to catching up with you next Friday on At the Coalface Live. Cheers, guys. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.